I feel like I'm having a slow start today. I've been looking at audiobooks, trying to figure out which one will be next. I finished Murakami's book on writing yesterday. It was well-tempered for the most part. It's all steady and reasonable and remains in the intellect rather than the emotional. There's a part of me that thinks of Murakami and for him how important fiction is, and how I've turned my back on fiction for the past while. I've spent a lot of time writing fiction and having that world, but I've still felt like I don't want to go down the road with it lately. I feel the need to write about myself in a very direct way. He was saying that for the most part, he writes 1,500 words a day. He starts every morning and he works for about 5 or 6 hours on it. I've been doing 3,000 a day roughly, unless I'm editing. I've been trying to stretch myself as thin as possible. It seems that when I'm writing about so little, with such disregard and knowing so much of it will be deleted, that overexerting myself allows me to go deeper into my conscious and write about things that I wouldn't be able to write otherwise. It has kept my attention. I do feel like I'm getting somewhere with it. I wrote about how my writing had felt like it was moving slowly. How I'd become addicted to the library app, browsing through all the titles, bookmarking the ones I want to read next and in what order. I listened to a book by Thich Nhat Hanh called Reconciliation. I wrote down 2 quotes, both taken from different sections of the book. The first: when we agonize over questions like who am I, where do I come from, was I wanted, what is the meaning of life, we suffer because we are caught in the idea of a separate self. But if we look deeply, we can practice no self. This is the realization that we are not a separate self. Later in the book, he says, "It's exactly because we have suffered that now we have the opportunity to recognize the path to liberation, love, and understanding." I know that I ask many existential questions throughout the day, asking who I am, what I want, what is the meaning of life, and things like that. And it does cause a lot of suffering, but through that suffering, it seems, I'm able to move forward eventually. Sometimes it's difficult, and I go through periods of hopelessness and agony, in ways that don't really make sense, in ways that are most often disproportional to what they warrant. I wrote about how the day seemed ordinary. I wrote about the editing that I was working on, how I didn't quite understand what the work was about, but something seemed very natural about it. It seemed correct to me. I thought about the sequence of it, how it was different than the one that came before, and how it might complement it. I felt inspired to see what would come after it, where my train of thought would take me next. I see now, as I look back on what I was doing, that I felt excitement, that doing this kind of writing, it revealed a lot of suffering that I felt. But as I faced it, as I held it up to the light, its disproportion, its indescribable shape, I was able to put it onto the counter and to see it. The ideas behind the words were often quite fragile. They didn't always make sense, floating where they did, so I would try to rein them in a bit. But if they were brought too far down from the abstract, the gravity was released and they would fall to the ground and shatter. For the most part, it would be best to leave them as they were. They either worked or they didn't. We're going to go to Costco tomorrow after Nora wakes up from her nap. I always get very excited to go there, even though we go most every week. My therapist had asked me what I knew about being neurodivergent. I told her that I'd been diagnosed with ADD, which she knew, but that isn't what she meant. I really didn't think much of it when we spoke. It seemed casual somehow, but the next night and into the next day, it had begun to really sink in with me. I watched some videos by Temple Grandin, thinking of my life with the perspective that she offered. I had the sense that my soul of my body or something like that. I went into the library website and tried to get a sense of what books I could read on the subject. I put a few on hold. There are many tests on the internet to self-diagnose yourself with anything you could ever dream of. So one test I found through the Autism Canada website. There were 50 questions you could answer. Definitely agree, slightly disagree, definitely disagree. I read through the questions, picking off my answers. I prefer to do things with others rather than on my own. I prefer to do things the same way over and over again. I find social situations easy. I would rather go to a library than a party. I find myself drawn more strongly to people than to things. I tend to have very strong interests, which I get upset about if I can't pursue. I enjoy social chit-chat. I find it hard to make new friends. It does not upset me if my daily routine is disturbed. I frequently find that I don't know how to keep a conversation going. I'm not very good at remembering phone numbers. People often tell me that I keep going on and on about the same thing. I enjoy social occasions. New situations make me anxious. I enjoy meeting new people. Questions like that. What struck me most was how this group of questions among the others made me feel seen. I scored a 32, which meant I was in the high-risk category. I asked Miriam to do the test. She scored about a 7. She sent it to her friend. A little higher, a 12. That friend sent it to her sister. 14. She sent it to her boyfriend. Less. Miriam sent it to another friend. She also scored a 7. Miriam's mom scored the highest from the group, 17. All 6 of the people that she sent it to, none of them showed any risk. I did the test again, going over each question with Miriam. The result was the same, 32. Maybe it was just a dumb internet test. It wasn't a diagnosis. It's true that Miriam had suggested before that I had some spectrum in me, and it seemed that my therapist too now had the same idea. Last night after I talked to my mom and dad, I began to cry. Miriam lay near me. I didn't have anything to say. Eventually we watched some TV. This whole neurodivergent spectrum thing, it's been a lot to consider, to know what to do with. I feel like I've lost my footing, like I've lost sight of myself. The way it's felt to be an outsider, having tried to fit in all these years, but always having the sense that I couldn't sort it out. I became distracted for the last 15 or 20 minutes on the library website looking at books again, looking through titles, thinking of which ones I want to read one day. I sometimes wonder if I spend more time looking through titles than I actually do reading the books themselves, to figure out if one particular book will lead me to where I want to go or not. I suppose to learn something, to see the world a bit differently, to see myself a bit differently, or maybe, more accurately, to better recognize the world and myself in it. Logically, I should not feel as disconnected from others as I do, but inherently, I feel misunderstood and unable to connect with most people. I see others connecting with one another, but it seems somehow that I'm separate from that. And so, what is there to do about it? There's a side of me that thinks that if only I can write things properly, to edit it properly, to bring the right sacrifice to the altar, that I will find some kind of salvation. This idea of being neurodivergent seems to soften my entire perspective. Like there's an amount of coddling that's associated with it. Infantilizing those with this thing, like I've been infantilizing myself with it. Suddenly I'm wearing oven mitts. That is what happens. I think that what I do have, if I have this thing, if I qualify, is extremely mild. It is mild enough that I've got my issues, but not prevalent enough to be noticed by most everyone I've ever known, except my wife and my therapist. I couldn't help but view the world with this lens of what it might mean that my brain was truly wired differently than others. I'd always knew that to some extent, with the ADD diagnosis I got when I was young, but this idea of being on the spectrum was different. The awareness of it has been frightening to me in the past day or so. Looking at the streetlights and all the other cars, it's true, I always had the sense that this place wasn't built for me. The anxiety floated somewhere between the pit of my stomach and up into my chest as I drove. I was surprised by how good the parking spot I found was. Miriam pushed Nora in the stroller. I took a cart from the aisle. It seemed okay at first. Miriam saw an ice cream making machine. The wheel of the cart began rumbling and shook the metal in a strange and aggressive way. We took a cart that someone had abandoned by the mattresses and put the diaper bag in it. It was much smoother. We got apples, bananas, avocados, a special cheese that was on sale, spinach and lettuce. I continued to think about everything I'd been reading about being on the spectrum, how the possibility of me being a part of that spectrum, even on a very small scale, made a kind of sense to me that I wasn't sure if I should trust. The thought that struck me was that every person was truly wired differently. I'd always had the belief that at the root of everything we were all the same. But this new perspective about these incredible differences between some of us made a lot of sense. Tomatoes were on sale. Salmon was on sale. We bought 2 bags of it. I bought a turkey thing that was on sale. I got cream for Miriam's mom and another flat of eggs. Miriam told me that she felt anxious from the way everyone was acting in there. I was surprised to hear that from her. Usually she wasn't bothered by that kind of thing. I asked her if she would prefer if I took Nora. She said that was okay. I told her we could go slowly, not to worry. It would calm down once we went down the aisles. Miriam had the ability to say how she was feeling in a way that I didn't. If I felt uncomfortable, I would keep it to myself. I would even keep it from myself until I couldn't take it anymore. I thought of my dad, how he pushed the Costco cart up and down the aisle. not saying much, nodding as my mom became excited about the new products that she'd found. I'd become more than I ever thought I would. We passed the books, and they had one that Miriam had on hold from the library. She was 500th or so in line for it. I told her that I'd be happy to buy it for her. She held the book, the fluorescent lights reflecting off its golden dust jacket. I sensed her excitement and was able to talk her into putting it into the cart. I had the sense as we went down the last aisles, looking at the onion flakes and the Kewpie salad dressing. I truly had the sense that maybe the way I was, maybe it wasn't my fault. Maybe I could forgive myself for being who I was. After we paid, we took a bite of some of the cookies we got. Miriam thought there was something wrong with them. She went to return them. I stayed with Nora under the heat lamp by the exit. I knelt down and she became calm. She would never remember any of this, and maybe I wouldn't either. But I felt a renewed sense of who I was, being there. I was her dad.